on this episode of Guidebook Greenroom. We are mixing things up. Today, I will be conducting the interview with our community and event manager, Nathan. Nathan, are you excited to be in the spotlight today?
Definitely. I feel prepared, ready to go, and in very safe hands.
We'll see which part of that sentence is true. Uh,
Hopefully, one bit.
yeah, at least one bit. Well, let's dive right in. I would love to pick your brain today about a very critical topic, data. Data. Developing strategies around event data and app data has become increasingly important in our industry. And I'd love if you could just walk us through, like, why is data so crucial?
Yeah, definitely. A really good and important topic. And I think for everyone, we all went through a period of like big data. We must like know how to utilize data, analyze data. I want more data. And I think we kind of got trapped in the just I want more data journey for a very long time. And I think event organizers have been using data in lots of ways for a long time, especially when it comes to things like obviously your marketing outputs, your registration trends and behaviors that you kind of see year on year with different events and getting an understanding of what the data is telling you around booking patterns and things like that. But the one gap that I think is still for a lot of people a gap, and we definitely talk to clients that aren't utilizing all of the data that's in front of them, but yet wanting more, is around kind of the technology piece. Whether that's a mobile app, your polling data, like whatever you're using, I think there's this wealth of data that becomes more strategic. It can allow you to kind of really analyze event performance and then get ahead of planning year on year. And I think that's
Mhm.
that's an area for me that I feel quite strongly about, where it's, there's a level of upskilling that's needed, or level of time put aside where you can use this data a lot better. Because I think we're doing a good job over here with registration. We know, like, especially for conferences and trade shows, they know when the big surges are coming in bookings. We've even now kind of understood what COVID's done to that. People are booking later, and you can kind of adapt your ticketing strategy, your discount strategy, your marketing strategy when you kind of want to go big on social or when you want to go big on email. So I think that's all pretty locked up. But there's this piece around content. There's this piece around like attendee behavior and engagement that I think is really quite a meaty and interesting topic still.
Amazing. Yeah, there's a lot to dig in there. I liked a couple things, especially that you said. Uh, the concept of more data versus impactful data, or like data that's actually worth spending your time on to then inform some future decision making. And then I also think it's important to talk about different technological solutions, right? And how the type of data you can collect and how you can make meaning of it. So let's make our way there. Let's start with this content piece that you just mentioned. How can event organizers ensure that they are optimizing that content delivery, making sure that they're getting content out to their audience that resonates most with them?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And there's a few ways, okay? So there's the traditional methods that I think, like let's go to the very beginning when you're putting together an agenda, okay? You're speaking to the market, you're doing a lot of research calls, you're trying to get an understanding of what's important to people when you're kind of going to create content. Essentially, you're going to sell back to them at some point throughout your marketing plan, or recruit them to speak to that content. And that's like a great first step, and it's really important, but you're speaking to a really small percentage of the market. If you I've worked in places where they say 30 research calls, then you go and like build your agenda, which is, that's quite a lot to do. But when you actually think of the market size, it's tiny. And then that your own market grows as you bring on sponsors, attendees, other speakers, and I think it's that kind of, how do we analyze all of that data that then engages with the content we created that people are missing out on? Of course, there's always been feedback forms, and at one point they're in paper, and then they kind of move
Mhm.
to Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, mobile apps, whatever it would be. But then again, you're relying on people, and you're relying on people filling in that data and giving you kind of qualitative feedback. and that's where for me it's like the app is so important. It's so great because you don't necessarily need to rely on that feedback anymore. You can try and get that for additional data points. But actually what the app can start doing, you and other pieces of technology you might be using, is like how people are interacting with your agenda. So like when you look at a paper agenda or a pamphlet in the past, some people will probably sit there and just put a line through the ones they're not that interested in. Now we can see the ones that on the app people aren't even bothering opening up, right? We can see the ones that people are opening up. And that's when you can really start spotting parallels between that behavior or tracks or content types or even the types of speakers that you get. Like, it's hard to get headline speaker after headline speaker after headline speaker. And you kind of know that. But what's always interesting is like, even when you're doing traditional feedback methods, just because they're the CMO from Lego, and I'm not kind of saying that would be a bad speaker, but like that's a great example of when you would kind of, if you manage to book that speaker, you'd be super chuffed. It looks great on the branding, it looks great on the marketing, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a good piece of content. It doesn't mean it's going to get great feedback. And you might not always know that unless you're looking at how people engage with the app or whatever it is that you're kind of using. And that's where I think you can start doing some deeper analysis. Like it's just there, it's in dashboards, it's right in front of you. You can take that and ask better questions to your audience. You can kind of get an understanding of how people are putting their schedules together or engaging with your app. And actually it's like, what do you do with that information? Because most people are going to have after at the end of the event, you're going to have some kind of debrief, some kind of wash up meeting where you say what went well, what didn't go well. And there's this rich bit of content data that I hope, but if not, like people really should be bringing into the discussion, because then that forms next year's research, or it forms like webinars that you should go and test in the interim period, in the kind of downtime between your events and things like that. And it opens up a really interesting kind of component of event planning, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely something in there about balancing the kind of event you want to put on and the kind of event your audience wants to attend and what kind of information or content they want to consume or experience at your event with peers, with this audience that you've put together. The forums is such a specific, great example. Thinking about data, automation, optimizing content delivery, but also optimizing like event organizer processes. I think that's also a big piece of the conversation. So with the right tools, you can reach a statistically significant sample size of your market more easily, more quickly, maybe even automatically, because yeah, you have the actual feedback forms that people fill out, but you also just have the data points of like, what are they tapping on? What are they clicking on? What information are they viewing? And that behavior can be a lot more telling than a conversation, right? I might not be willing to tell you on the phone that I would love to hear from the CMO of Lego. But if I'm attending your event as an attendee and I'm poking around in the app, you might see like a whole bunch of taps on that content. I'm looking at that schedule session over and over. I'm going to that speaker bio over and over. So really insightful there. And then something that you kind of touched on was using that real-time insight to inform the attendee experience. Sure, year over year, but what about like in the here and now? What about bringing an element of personalization to an event experience using the data you can access immediately?
Yeah, and I think that's the harder piece, right? That's the bit where you kind of need to really think about, if you have different audiences that are attending the event, if you can segment them and see, are there kind of areas where there's a lot of interest? And I think what you can then do is use that to highlight sessions that relate or kind of complement those sessions that are being viewed. Some people, for instance, an example, you might launch your app 4 weeks out, the schedule's in there, but then 3 or 2 weeks out, you get a few more speakers coming in, because that can happen. You update your agenda. And actually then what you want to do is promote them, but promote them effectively to the people that are interested in certain sessions. Or you kind of want to say like, you want to start drawing the links for people, and like the app data can help you do that. I also think there's an element of, when you see other people who are going in and building their scheduling, not everyone might be doing that. And you can use that data to then share those benefits to people who aren't doing that yet, right? You want to promote why that is important, the kind of the experience it can give you on site if you're a little bit more planned. If you've got, I was in an event yesterday, there's limited capacity, and you want to be on top of that. So some of the sessions are getting booked up, they're full. And you can use that to drive attendee behavior as well. But not let people just kind of experience that on their own, like get ahead of it. Use push notifications. People might not even be in the app yet, so use that as a marketing tactic to kind of drive people to the app, like sessions are getting booked, or you know yeah, whatever that may be. It's just a good way to kind of bring people into the app and making sure they're, like you say, like creating that personalized experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the personalization and those on-the-fly adjustments can be really impactful on the user experience and help people discover what they might not discover on their own, or give them an alternate path, if that room does fill up. And speaking of the room filling up, again, this data can help not only deliver an incredible experience, but help event organizers manage the event, help with that planning, help with that the day-to-day scramble of whatever changes happen. So what are some ways, like, what does that look like in reality? What are some ways data can be used by the event organizer, maybe on site?
Yeah, I mean, on site. So I think there's some ways. I think there's an element of planning. So if you have got a multi-track event, it, you need to know where footfall's moving. And again, like your app data can start giving you that information. Okay. There were definitely, I've seen surges in traffic happen when rooms are kind of overbooked, or like they're a lot more popular than other sessions. So you kind of need to get ahead of that, because and this is, so the event I went to this week, they're scanning people in. That's great. So they know how many people are coming. They know how many people scanning to put on the door to ensure there's not a backlog of queuing, to make the flow easy. Because there's nothing worse when you've got 10 minutes to get across, an event floor from one session to the next. And then you get there and there's a huge queue because they're trying to scan everyone in and they're not prepared. And it's like that data in the app is telling you how to deploy your team, how to deploy like the support that you need on site. So I think that's really important, because we're constantly thinking about the attendee experience, and there are just things we can get ahead of, and that's a good example of that. I think another thing I just wanted to kind of come back to as well, when you're marketing your event, or when you're marketing anything, right now, you're running A/B tests, you're kind of seeing what works, doubling down and going ahead, and I think that is something that is more doable now as well with session titles and session abstracts. So
Mhm.
when you're looking at your app and you see, some sessions are doing really well and getting a lot of engagement and some aren't, it's not just that they might not be good sessions. It might be that the content's wrong. You weren't able to do that before when it was like on your website and that's the only place people saw the agenda, or in a pamphlet. But now there's this element of, well, what happens if I tweak this? Like, what happens if I make this session headline just, maybe it's a bit dry, maybe it doesn't kind of give you an insight into what the session's going to be about. And it just spends some time kind of readjusting those things and seeing if that improves performance, much like you would in a marketing context, or, kind of anything else on social media. You're always testing and testing. And I think as event organizers, we probably don't think of that as something we can do as well with our agenda, but you really can in the app. So it might not just be that the session is not that well received, it just might not be well understood, and I think that's something we need to kind of look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I like this through line of something that you're kind of indirectly sharing, which is the power of data, right? How it empowers you as the event organizer, and also how it can empower your attendees, and in defining what that experience looks like, and how either party gets value out of the app experience.